Thomas Lovejoy is a university professor at George Mason University, an expert on the Amazon. He's worked there since 1965. Tom, welcome to Now, and thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
You were one of the grandfathers, or fathers, I should say, of bringing attention to the whole notion of deforestation in tropical environments. When you first began talking about that, did you envision we would be where we are today?
You know, it's a really good question because there was only one road in the Amazon, right? In an area like the 48 states. Mm-hmm. But one sensed there was a potential, and then all of a sudden it started to happen, and now it's like 20% deforested and heading in a bad direction.
Similarly, biological diversity, or biodiversity for shorthand, you had a role in the creation of that terminology. Are we worse off than you thought we were when you first started talking about it and you identified the phenomena?
So, you know, I think the important thing in both those questions is there's a bad side of the ledger and then there's a good side of the ledger. And so on the Amazon, the whole idea that more than 50% of it would be under some form of protection would have been absurd to think or even aspire to. And yet that is the case. And so, you know, for biodiversity, the numbers get, you know, more and more discouraging, but a lot of good things are being done at the same time, and we're now sort of in the end game.
I guess what I'm trying to get at with some of these questions is how we should calibrate our expectations of not only what's happening, but what's possible in addressing what's happening.
So there's always a lot more possible than people realize, right? It's up to sort of human, you know, inclinations and human will, right? We could stop a lot of the bad trends pretty quickly.
Do you see the will? Is it in place?
You know, yes and no. I mean, I really miss it at the sort of higher levels of government and international things. But I see a lot more at sort of local and national level than I ever imagined might be the case.
If you were identifying the main problems, are they what we think they are? Is it just overdevelopment, overuse, gobbling up resources at such a rapid rate?
Well, you know, most of the direct things come from that, and then the indirect things like climate change also come from that. So climate change comes right on down on top of all the rest of it and hammers.
Well, the conference you attended today here at the Wilson Center, looking at a partnership among scientists in both Brazil and the United States. Talk to us about the potential of what's happening there and if there is some positive news to report in that regard.
So, I mean, if you actually look at the trajectory of science in the Brazilian Amazon and the international collaboration between Brazil and the United States and other countries in the Amazon, it's a really encouraging trend. You know, because scientists talk to each other as scientists. They don't talk to each other as nationalities.
Is there some breakthrough to be had in that regard? Can science save us from ourselves?
Science can certainly save us from ourselves if we choose to listen to science.
Mm-hmm. And do you think this type of collaborative creates a better megaphone that people will listen?
Absolutely. It's much stronger when it's not just a single voice, when it's a duality or more.
I should tell people watching us now that if they're interested in the conference that I referenced, you can come to the Wilson Center website and to the Brazil Institute page, and you'll be able to find a lot of the things that happened here today available to you, archived on that website. So what could be done if we were trying to talk about sort of treating the Amazon like a patient? And we were looking at sort of what needs to be done in the acute stage and what's a longer term recipe for better health. What do we need to address in the acute circumstance?
So there are a lot of immediate threats, you know, roads being planned, hydro projects being planned that aren't very sensible, you know, just sort of spontaneous colonization opportunities. Those all have to be addressed immediately. But the really important thing is the Amazon has to be managed as a system, and they need to address it in integrated planning and integrated management. You can't do it all separately and hope it'll come out right, because it won't.
In the scope of human endeavor, this systems thinking, is it relatively new?
Yes, it is, at least at this kind of scale, to recognize the Amazon actually works as a system. But, you know, some of the the pieces of the solution are really old, like zoning.
Just more sensible zoning. How the difficulty is obvious when you're talking about nation states and jurisdictions. The world may have an interest, but the world doesn't control the real estate. Is there a way to break through in that regard?
Absolutely. I mean, there's all kinds of potential here for international collaboration. And even within the Amazon itself, you're talking about 8 different countries, right? So there really needs to be coordination and collaboration amongst the 8 of them.
Final question for now, because this is an ongoing discussion. So, yeah. But what should be the expectation as far as how much time we have to get this right?
So it's not a lot of time at all. I mean,
really?
As far as the Amazon is concerned, it's probably less than a decade because it's very close to some thresholds. And yet there are things you can do like, ambitious reforestation, which would actually push the threshold farther away.
Well, Tom Lovejoy, thanks for joining us. Important information, but also a little bit scary. With only 10 years to work with. Thanks.
Thank you very much.